She is barren, useless to our bloodline. Send her to the human world as punishment. Let them have her." The stars had always felt closer to Princess Saraphine than the cold marble floors of the Celestian Empire's palace. She had grown up watching them from her tower window, billions of silver lights scattered across the black canvas of the universe. She had always believed that somewhere beyond them, something warm was waiting for her. But the Celestian Empire did not believe in warmth. They believed in power, bloodlines, and legacy. Saraphine was the third daughter of Emperor Vale, ruler of 17 star systems. She was considered the most beautiful being in the known cosmos, a fact that gave her no comfort because beauty without fertility meant nothing to her people. Celestian royalty measured worth by heirs, and the royal physicians had confirmed what Saraphine had always feared. She could not bear children. Her womb, they said, was like a frozen moon, beautiful, cold, and lifeless. The whispers started immediately. What use is a barren princess? She is decoration, not royalty. When Emperor Vale's council gathered to discuss her future, the eldest elder, Lord Caden, stood before the silver throne and made his suggestion with a cruel smile stretched across his ancient face. "Send her to Earth," he said, "to the humans. Let her live among those primitive creatures as punishment for her uselessness. It will be the greatest joke the Empire has ever played." The council laughed. Even her father did not object. Saraphine was given no choice. Within 3 rotations of their moon, she was dressed in a disguise of human clothing and transported to a small coastal town on the northern edge of a country called Norway. She was given a human name, Sarah, a small apartment, and a translator chip behind her left ear. She was given nothing else. The first winter on Earth nearly broke her. The cold did not bother her. She was Celestian after all, but the loneliness did. She had gone from palace halls filled with servants and courtiers to a silent apartment above a harbor, where the only sound was the crashing of gray waves against stone. She took a job at a small library because it was the only place where she felt she could sit among human knowledge without being questioned too deeply. It was there that she met Ethan Cole. He was a marine biologist, quiet, thoughtful, and completely unbothered by the things that impressed most humans. He came to the library every Thursday evening and always chose the same table near the window. He always ordered the same black coffee from the cafe next door and brought it in a dented steel thermos. The first time he spoke to her, he simply slid a book across the table. "You've been staring at the ocean chapter of that atlas for 40 minutes, he said without looking up from his own book. "I thought you might want the real thing." It was a field guide to deep-sea creatures. Inside the front cover, he had drawn a tiny cartoon whale wearing a crown and written, "For whoever needs the ocean today." Saraphine stared at it for a long moment. Then, for the first time since arriving on Earth, she laughed. Over the following months, something grew between them, quietly, like a tide that rises before anyone notices. Ethan never asked why her skin shimmered faintly in the moonlight or why her eyes glowed whenever she was emotional. He simply accepted her the way the ocean accepts everything the sky drops into it. He showed her tide pools and the northern lights. She told him stories she called old myths from her homeland. Stories about empires among the stars, wars fought over bloodlines, and a princess who had been thrown away because she could not give her people what they demanded. "That princess sounds brave to me," Ethan said one evening as they sat on the rocks watching the aurora bleed green and violet across the sky. "Anyone who survives being discarded and still finds reasons to laugh, that's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever heard." She looked at him. Then she really looked at him. Something shifted inside her chest, deep and irreversible, like a tectonic plate moving after centuries of stillness. 7 months later, Saraphine woke before dawn with a sensation she had never felt before. A warmth, presence, small, impossible, and undeniable. The Celestian medical scanner she kept hidden in her drawer confirmed it within seconds. She was carrying a child. She sat on the floor of her small apartment for a very long time, pressing her hand against her stomach as tears ran silently down her face. Not from grief, but from a disbelief so enormous it had no other escape. The barren princess, the frozen moon, the Empire's cruelest joke. was carrying a child. When she finally returned to the Celestian Empire, not summoned, but arriving on her own terms, dressed in full royal white and silver, a crown upon her head and an infant held against her chest, the throne room fell completely silent. Lord Caden rose from his seat, his ancient face draining of color. Her father, Emperor Vale, stared at the child as though he were witnessing something that violated the laws of the universe. Saraphine walked forward slowly, each step deliberate, until she stood at the center of the chamber where they had laughed at her, dismissed her, and erased her. She looked at each of them in turn. "You sent me away as a joke," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silence. "You called me barren. You called me useless. You handed me to a world you considered beneath you, and that world gave me what your empire never could." She looked down at her child, her daughter, with dark hair, ice-blue eyes, and a tiny fist curled around her mother's finger. "Her name is Lyra," Saraphine said, "and she will inherit everything." No one in the throne room spoke. The joke, it turned out, had always been on them. Saraphine stood at the center of the throne room, her silver crown catching every light, her daughter breathing softly against her chest. She looked at the faces that had laughed at her, her father, the elders, the entire court, and felt nothing but calm. Not anger, not grief, only peace. The woman who had once walked out of that room broken had returned whole. She had crossed galaxies, survived exile, found love in the most unexpected place, and created life where they had sworn none could exist. She was never their joke. She had always been their greatest mistake. Holding Lyra close, she smiled quietly and said nothing more. Her silence spoke louder than all their cruelty ever could.